Welcome to Mishna study of the Masechet Kilayim, Perek Bet Mishna Aleph. Over here in this Mishnah, it starts to get interesting. Here's where we start to get to the measurements. We're going to speak about the measurements of Kilayim. Now, remember, when we speak about measurements of Kilayim, I'm going to talk what constitutes Kilayim? How much is it? So, like a lot of times we'll have something that's Batil B'Shishim, right? And in that case, we don't have to worry about it, but if it's over here when it comes to Kilayim, we'll see there's a specific measurement where if some seeds get mixed up together with other seeds, it's going to be considered Kilayim. And what do we need to do with that? Right? That's also a separate question of what do we do with once we do have Kilayim. That's going to be the focus of our Mishnah. Remember, we're talking about over here grains, right? We're not talking about vegetables. Over here, we're talking about grains or legumes, right? So beans or wheats, barleys, different types of grains. Kol se'ah sheyesh ba rova zera mimin acher yema'et. Rabbi Yosef omer yavor. Ben mimin echad uben mishene minim. Rabbi Shimon omer lo amru ela mimin echad. Chachamim omrim kol shu kilayim b'se'ah mitzaref larova. So any se'ah that has rova zera. So what's a rova? We know rova is a quarter of a kab. So a se'ah we know has how many kab? Se'ah has 6 kav in it. And over here we're saying, if you have a quarter of a kav getting mixed in with 6 kav, so what's the ratio? It's on the screen, 1/24, right? So it's just below, just a little bit above 4%. That would be considered kilayim, right? According to Tanakama. Now, what do you do if you have this mixture of, 1 in 24? Right, so let's say 1 in 24 barley got mixed into wheat. Now what do? Tanakama says yema'et. You need to reduce it. Now, how do you reduce it? Either by adding more wheat or by taking away a little of the barley, right? Until it's less than 1 in 24. Once you have less than that ratio, you're good. Rabbi Yosef omer yavor. Now, Rabbi Yosef says you can't just reduce it. You go ahead and add more wheat to it, or take away a little bit of the barley so the ratio is off. Once you have kilayim in your hand and you're about to go plant it, by the way, that's what we're talking about. It's in your hand. So Tanakama says you could add a little bit more wheat before you go plant it, or take away a little of the barley. Rabbi Yosef says no, you need to separate everything. Once you find out that you have any type of mixture, go ahead and separate everything. Ben mimin echad uben mishene minim. Now, according to Rabbi Yosef, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about one grain that got mixed in with another grain, or 2 grains that got mixed in with another grain. Meaning what? This is the first scenario when we said you had 3 portions of wheat and you had 1 portion of barley that got mixed in. So according to the Rabbi Yosef, in that case, you need to separate it. Or the next case would be, let's say, 23 portions of wheat, but you didn't have 1/24 of barley. He had 1/48 of barley and 1/48 of peas, right? So over here, Rabbi Yosef says, even in this case, we're not going to say we look at the barley, separate, to the wheat and say, oh, look, there's only 1/48 barley. That's way under the ratio, so, maybe you don't have to. Because no, even in this case, you need to go ahead and separate everything that's there. Whereas opposed to Rabbi Shimon omer lo amru ela mimin echad. Rabbi Shimon says, no, the only time you need to separate it is when there's min echad, when there's 1, right? That was the last, right? That was the last slide. If you have 1, you just have barley, they got mixed into wheat. Okay, that's the ratio of 1/24 got mixed into 23/24. But in this case, where you have a 48th of barley and a 48th of peas, they got mixed into 23/24 of wheat. Oh, in this case, Rabbi Shimon says that would be okay. Why would this be okay? Because he looks at each one separately. He looks at the barley separately. Oh, 1/48 fell in. That's less than the ratio. Or 1/48 of peas fell in. That's less than the ratio. So that is Rabbi Shimon. Right? So far, we have all those opinions. Now, Chachamim omrim, Chachamim say, "Lo kol shu kilayim b'se'ah mitzaref larova." Anything that's kilayim, right, with one another, is going to be mitzaref, is going to combine to fill this 1/24. Meaning what? Let's say we had in the last case, I'm going to flip the slide back again. The last case, Each one of these, barley and peas, are kilayim, right, to each other, and they're kilayim to the wheat. So we're going to say that that's not going to, you can't, that doesn't mix. Chachamim would say you have to separate that. But in this case, where you have a 48th of barley and a 48th of darnel, remember darnel was the cheap wheat that was allowed to be planted with wheat. Remember, wheat and darnel, right? This was the hita and the, what was that? What do we call it? Hita and zunin, right? The hita and the zunin, both of these, the wheat and the darnel, they're not kilayim with one another. So Chachamim would say in this case, where you have 23/24 wheat and another 1/48 of darnel, if you have barley that falls into that, that's fine. That's not going to be a problem. Why? Because the darnel and the wheat are not kilayim with one another. So Chachamim would allow it in this scenario over here. Halacha is like Chachamim. Halacha is not like Rabbi Yosef. So halacha is like Tanna Kama. First of all, that if you do have it in your hand, you're allowed to separate it out, right? You don't have to, you're allowed to just or add to it or take away a little. As long as you're below the ratio, below the proportion of 1/24, then you're okay. And halacha is also like Chachamim, right? That if it doesn't matter, even if it's two separate meaning, you have to separate it out unless one of those two is not kilayim with the main pile, right? For example, if you had the zunin, is not kilayim with the wheat. Right? That really sums up our Mishnah over here. I just want to point out that Harambam points out a very important halacha, and that is what happens once you planted it. You went ahead and you planted these seeds, right? Someone violated, they did that. Now what do you do? So Harambam says you look at the same ratio again, right? If it's 1/24, right, then that's considered kilayim. Then what do? You need to uproot everything, uproot everything and throw it out. Why? Because the din ma'et also applies when it grows. So mi'ikar din, what would you supposed to be do? You were supposed to actually rip out everything and throw it away. Now what happened though? Meaning anyone would have to do it. You see a field like this, it's your obligation to go ahead and rip it out. But what would happen? People, they weren't nizharin kilayim, right? And they weren't worried about other people coming up and ripping it out because that would end up cleaning the field. They were weeding the fields for them. It would clean it out. They'd end up like plowing it for them. And what happened? People were almost like, okay, we'll plant kilayim. And worst case, someone comes out and he cleans my fields for me. Chachamim saw this and they were metaken what? Right? Once someone plants kilayim, Chachamim made a takana that you need to be mafkir. You make ownerless. This person's field becomes ownerless, and the Bet Din has the power to do so. All right. So that sums up our Mishnah. Next Mishnah, we're going to speak about not these seeds, not these grains, sorry, but rather seeds for planting, and we'll see a different measurement that applies to those.